maybe just an overview of kind of what your story looks like so far when it comes to kind of your tech career.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Zubin, and I've been in the tech world as an engineer not that long, probably just about coming to 5 years now. I was 37, no, 38 when I finally managed to make the transition into a coding role. I have zero technical background. I used to be a lawyer for a very, very long time. Then I was in executive management for a while. Had my own startup, and that's kind of how I learned to code, Ryan. I had a startup. I was non-technical. I paid a lot of money to a few people to build it. Then I found myself a technical co-founder. He quit, and I had all these contracts I had to deliver on. And so I'm like, I better learn to code if I'm going to honor the contracts. And that's kind of how it started. And then the startup was going down the toilet. The unit economics, big lesson for me. The technology actually doesn't solve a lot of problems the way we think it does. And so I taught myself to code and said, I'm going to restart my career. Effectively took an almost 80% pay cut to do that, and start over again as a junior engineer. And then a year after that, I ended up going to Google, and then now I'm at Chainlink in a DevRel engineering capacity because I wanted to teach and not just write code as well. So, I moved into a half engineering, half teaching role. And yeah, that brings me to where I am now.
That's definitely a nice kind of concise overview of kind of your tech career so far here. And, not, I think you see people go one of two ways with coding, to where a lot of people are self-taught and they get into coding as, at least here in the States, you don't necessarily need a coding degree from a college or something like that to get into it and to get a job. But you also get the people that have been kind of coding their whole lives, and they grew up with like a computer in their lap and they got their CS degree and kind of went that route as well. So, I'd be very interested in, and you mentioned a few of these in your kind of free code camp video as well, but were there any kind of misconceptions that you had when you kind of first started transitioning into learning to code, or did you have any of those? I'll get questions from people starting out like, hey, I don't know if I'm smart enough or good enough at math to get into coding, or were there any kind of those misconceptions, or maybe those ended up being true? Was there anything like that comes to mind?
Oh, so many, Ryan. And I think this is where I'll probably be a little less concise than the previous answer because really my answer is going to span a full decade. Right? So for me, just to be clear, I was sort of self-taught, but I had a coach as well who was non-technical, who showed me some of the internal behavioral change that I needed to make it. But that happened much later. I started learning to code in 2013, right? And I only transitioned, just to put this in perspective. I got my first coding job in 2019. Okay. That's a long time. Now, I wasn't consistently coding through that. I was doing what most people do, trying to do it for free and quitting. Okay. Now, the reality is most people will not do it. And here's a couple of the myths. Number one myth, which actually wasn't covered in the free code camp video, but I've now come to see it's a really big one in this post-influencer era. Number one myth, learning to code is good enough to get a job. It's not. Okay, because it's literacy. And there's a huge difference between somebody who knows how to play basketball and somebody who's in the NBA, right? Or someone who knows how to bake well and someone who builds a confectionery business. Very different, right? And the same thing between learning to code and being a professional coder. Huge difference, okay? Especially for those people like me who are transitioning from an entire different industry. So that's the first myth. And that's kind of why it took me 6 years, is because I didn't know what I was doing. I was guessing. I was getting stuck in tutorial hell. I was starting and stopping. I was jumping. I was getting confused by the media. And again, I started 2013, 2014, 2015. I restarted 4 years straight. Oh, no, not 4 years straight. I took a few years off in the middle because I did my MBA. And I was also transitioning out of the law into another career first. So, all that took 2 years. But all this jumping around. And then just to keep this in context, in 2013, MOOCs, massively online open courses, was starting to be a thing, right? Today it's mainstream. Back then it wasn't. Even then, completion rates were terrible. Just like today, completion rates are less than 10%, okay? Because people jump around. I did that too. And when you jump around, you don't learn anything. And the worst part is this narrative is just learn a few languages. That's what's hot right now. Learn Rust, learn React, learn Next, learn this framework. That's what coders do. That's not what coders do. I spend far more of my time reading code than writing code anyway. And that's a whole different. opposite, right? I mean, you've probably seen this too in your career.
Yeah.
You spend more time reading. So that's one myth, that you're learning to code, enough. It's not. Certainly not for a career change, and it's definitely not enough to get to professional level standards. Second one is that I labored under, that probably delayed my start for a very long time, into even trying to learn to code, was that you need to be some sort of math geek. You don't. I think it helps a lot to be able to think clearly, but I think even more than the math stuff, I think it helps a lot to think in abstractions. If you can develop the ability in your brain to think about ideas and concepts and the movement of things abstractly, that helps a lot more than math does directly day to day. So abstract thinking is a developed skill. It's some people, obviously, like everything else, like running, some people are just naturally better at it, but 100%, a slow runner can become a significantly faster runner with time and effort, right? So you can always improve yourself 5x if you need to. You may never be world class, and you don't have to be. So that, who cares, but you can improve a lot. So it's a learnable skill. So that's myth number 2. Myth number 3 is that programming and computer science are the same thing, and I sort of covered this in the Free Code Camp video as well. It's not. They're not the same thing. Computer science helps a lot, but for my first coding job, I didn't really need a lot of computer science. I needed to know how to use the tools. Another big myth is that it's because other people make it look really easy, and Mark Zuckerberg built Facebook in a weekend. He did not, but that's what the popular narrative is, that if I can't do something as a weekend hacker, then I'm a crap coder. That's absolutely not true. Even maybe it's me, but I don't think it's me from what I'm seeing. It takes people way longer than they realize to do even simple things, because you get stuck on unexpected bugs. That's going to happen. Or you just don't know what you don't know when you start out, right? So this myth about, it's a fast skill, you can whip up my MVP for my next startup on the weekend. That's not a thing. It's usually a lot more than that. And the other big one that trips people up is that it's a funny one, Ryan, but if you and I say something is hard, we kind of know. Okay, like you're in Colorado, right? I've never been in the Denver area in winter. I heard it's cold. Again, I've heard it's cold. I have an idea what it looks like on the scale. I know it's going to be cold, but until I'm actually in it, I'm not going to know how cold that cold is. Okay, and so like that, when we told coding is hard, we all intellectually know, oh yeah, I know this is hard. I don't expect it easy. But then when it gets hard, we freak out. Oh, the course material is wrong. Oh, I'm not smart enough. Right? These are the 2 big reasons that I see. So I run a coaching program for career changers to code, and pretty much 100% of people are like, but this is so hard. I'm like, yeah, this is what hard looks like. This means you're on the right path. What were we expecting? No, I was expecting it to be hard. Well, you got what you expected, because it is hard. And they're like, are you sure it's not the material that we're working on? Are you sure it's not my ability? And I'm like, why does everyone automatically assume the material's not right, or the which can actually happen quite often, but obviously when I'm coaching people, I give them the material pitch to their level. I do audit tests and stuff to baseline them. So I know it's not the material, but I'm like, why does everyone assume that it's them, that they're not smart enough, when actually some stuff is just hard? Like the answer is the third option, not am I smart enough, not is the material right. The third option is some shit's hard, and this is what hard's going to look like for a long time. So those are the big myths, Ryan, I think. But what about you? What have you noticed among, especially in your journey, or people that, the younger engineers that come through past your work?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the similar ones that you mentioned. One that really stood out to me that I liked was the one that, like there's a lot of videos on YouTube that have millions of views that are like, I got a job at Google after 3 months, after like 0 to Google in 3 months. And it's like, maybe that person is telling the truth. Maybe they're being forthright, but I know that for pretty much anybody I've talked with, or my own experience, after 3 months of going from 0 to getting into coding, I sucked. Like, I was not a good coder. I was not at a professional level at that point.
No, absolutely not.
And I think that a lot of people, they get this misconception, seeing these kind of influencers online with those 0 to 100,000 job in 3 months, or something along those lines, are very popular videos. And it's like, man, if coding, like, think about it, guys, if coding was really this easy, and software engineers can make 6 figures plus pretty easily as well, then there's a mismatch there. Like, nothing is ever that easy that has that good of a payout. Like, it is too good to be true at some level. So that one really resonated.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad it did, because a lot of people acknowledge that to me after they've been through the journey, right? They've had the wrong expectations, and wrong expectations, to my mind, is a bigger reason for failure than lack of ability. Because if you expect the wrong thing, you will keep moving and switching, and you don't know what to expect because you don't know what you don't know. Like, if I've been to Denver, okay, but if I haven't been to, Vancouver, right? So if somebody tells me this is what you can expect in Vancouver, until I go there, I'm not going to know what it's actually like. Like when I moved to Australia, I'd been here, but I'd never lived here, and the two experiences are different. Visiting and actually living are completely different, right? So expectations really matter. And it's funny you say this thing about the 3 to 6 month thing. So here's my take on that. I don't think people are actually listening properly. Here's why. We hear what we want to hear. Do you know this guy, Clement Miliscu, the one who founded Algo Expert?
Yes, I actually, back in the day, would take some of his courses for data structures and algorithms and stuff.
Yeah.
So
did I. In fact, it was that's how I learned my DSA stuff, through him and LeetCode and a bunch of others. And I'd actually been on his YouTube channel back when he was still doing YouTube quite a lot. So there's an interview between him and me when I got into Google on his channel. And he talks about it openly, that he said, look, I did say I did it in 6 months. What people don't realize is I was doing it 12 hours a day for 6 months. Right. And I said, well, that's exactly right. Because it's one thing to say I did it in 3 months is a useless metric, right? It's a useless metric. If you say I did it in 800 hours, and I squeezed 800 hours out of 3 months, I don't even know if that's mathematically possible, but let's say I did, that's a completely different conversation than I've been doing this for 1 hour a day for 6 months. It's 180 hours. That's not going to take you anywhere. But had you done 10, that's 1,800 hours. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could do it in 6 months.
yeah, absolutely. And that, like, for me, it took me about well, technically speaking, when I was like working, so my background is actually exercise science. And during my master's program for that, I worked in a division that they put me in charge of the web development. And like, I had zero experience in that, and they just kind of threw me into it. So
why did they do that? You had no experience. Like, what were they thinking?
I don't know. I got the graduate job, and it was like, okay, you're young, you can handle this website, right? And I was like, sure. So I just kind of
back generation,
yeah, exactly. So I kind of had to figure out, like, it was a pretty basic website, just like mostly just a static website of HTML and CSS. But kind of over that year and a half, I started learning more about that. But then once I finished my master's degree with that experience, I thought it was really cool and kind of wanted to pursue that further. It did take me about 9 or 10 months from graduating to my first job. But, with that, I spent 10 to 12 hours every single day, relentlessly, Saturdays, Sundays, like every day, coding and working on projects for, several months straight. And I also had that kind of year and a half to where I kind of had a feel for HTML and CSS, which kind of gave me a leg up on those first several months. So can it be done in like, just several months? Absolutely. But can it be done in several months if you're working a full-time job and you only have 2 hours every morning to kind of work on it? Maybe, but it's going to be pretty challenging to do. So
yeah, and we also need to define what it is. There is no one level of software engineer, right? Like, for my first job, yeah, I could do a bunch of stuff, on web dev, a little bit on the back end. There is no way that would have prepared me for any of my other job. That was just not enough, right? And so, for example, when I went to Google, so I keep telling my students that just to establish timelines. Like, I was working full time and I had a separate 8-month study plan just for FANG. And it wasn't even the coding stuff. It was all computer science and DSA and problem solving. Just that. Forget the programming stuff, right? And so, and that's another thing. Like, a lot of people think, oh, if I just smash LeetCode, that makes me a great programmer. No, it doesn't. It makes you a great DSA solver. And when I was at Google, I've been on the interviewing side in all the professions I've been in. And I've interviewed people who are killer DSA folks, like competitive programmers who couldn't actually program or design an application. And I've seen the opposite. People who are tremendous product engineers who cannot do DSA. right? Because they've just not spent the time. It's not that they don't have the native ability. It's just not a skill they've had to develop yet. And DSA stuff is totally different from the programming stuff in my view, and the actual application development stuff. It totally is different. So I keep telling people, like, you don't need to do DSA for a lot of jobs. You don't. Arguably, if you're going for a company that requires DSA off the bat and that's your first job, you may be aiming for a far too competitive niche than where you're actually correctly leveled at. It's like, I mean, if you tell a 5-year-old that they're expected to run 10 miles, it's not that they can't one day, it's that they can't in that moment. They have to evolve into that. We all have to grow into the next stage, right? And I think trying to jump too far ahead and thinking there's one it. So when people define their goal, they're really badly defined to me. And I'm like, what are you trying to achieve? Are you wanting to be a beginner dev? Are you wanting to get into Google? What are you trying to do? It's a completely different goals.
Absolutely. And I think that's one thing that I did right when I because I went like completely self-taught route and, took a lot of online courses and stuff like that. And like my sole focus from day one is going from zero to front-end developer as fast as possible. I didn't even focus on back-end. I just focused on JavaScript, React, front-end development, because I knew that front-end developer jobs exist, front-end entry-level jobs exist, and that was my sole target from day one. So, yes, I did focus on like computer science fundamentals and learning some stuff about data structures and algorithms, but I was not spending like any time at all on like LeetCode and stuff like that. I work across the entire stack. I've been at my first job since I've even started, and like I'm doing background processes and cron jobs and all this kind of different stuff that I had no idea when I started. But like if I did a LeetCode challenge right now, I would probably fail it with flying colors. Like I am just purely application developer is where I sit. So,
and that's totally fine, right? Like that's probably the appropriate thing, because this is another thing I keep telling my students when they, for the ones who want to join my program, and if I think they're a good fit, I'm like, we are going to spend a long time identifying a goal. Because here's the thing, it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how much time you spend. It doesn't matter how much money you spend if you're going in the wrong direction, because direction is always more important than speed, right? Everyone's in a hurry, but direction is more important than speed. So do not start the journey. You would not get into your car and start driving and then figure out where you're going. You always know where you want to go before you get in the car, because you don't want to keep stopping and taking those U-turns and returning. You don't want to do all that. Just want to go, especially if you're already working in another career. And most of my students have some sort of family and they're working other careers. I'm like, you don't have time. Your competition is doing 50 hours a week. You're lucky to get 20 hours a week. Okay. You're going at 40% of their speed and you're trying to overtake them. Okay. We need to be absolutely brutal about the direction. And then you layer it one after the other, right? One after the other. So exactly, some of them just want to do front end. Some want to do full stack. A lot of them will come to me these days in the last year and say, oh, I want to do AI. And I'm like, why don't you just try and be a brain surgeon tomorrow? Might as well, right? I mean, because, that's all doctors. That's all medicine, right? And it's not the same. You've got to go through it step by step. And as Jeff Bezos says, you can't skip steps. No matter how much you like, you can't skip steps. You've got to do them one at a time, So, but it's a tough message, right? Because if your favorite influencer is telling you, yeah, I had this 150K job in 6 months and look at me here in Bali, that's like, that and remote work are the big misunderstood concepts, the time to success and remote work, So anyway, sorry, I was going on a bit of a soapbox rant there.
No, but I think it's definitely good to kind of explain the importance of defining goals as, and I see you're having some lighting issues over there, but
what happened is, this is the funny thing. So it's gone from pre-dawn, just after dawn to actually light. So give me a sec.
So you've got much more backlight now, so it's kind of making you a little bit darker. So yeah.
So that's going to be a lot better, because my blinds were slightly open and the sun came, and the east was on that side, so the sun came right up over the buildings, and there you go. Now it's much more stable.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you getting on bright and early in the morning with me here.
Right.
So cool. Yeah, I was just saying that I think it's super important to explain the importance of defining goals early on. As if someone like just jumping into it, they have to learn front end, they have to learn back end, they have to learn, even learning about GitHub and how pull requests work and how, different, like little kind of just DevOps stuff works like that, or learning about testing, or learning about data structures and algorithms, and like spending a lot of time on LeetCode and stuff like that. Like for most people, that especially people that have a current job and are transitioning and only might have a couple hours in the morning or evening to kind of work on this stuff, I think really narrowing down that goal makes a ton of sense there. So
absolutely, man. And I think reframing the problem, right? I mean, extending what you're saying there, so much of what we learn is to do with tooling and workflow process. It's not whether it's JavaScript or Java or Python. Like that's like saying if I learn English, I should be able to be a judge or an author or a bestseller. Like there's so many skills between the literacy and the compound skill of the profession, right? And the compound skills take a lot of effort to sort of wrap them up in the right model. And so when I work with my students, I'm like, we have to find the minimum effective dose because most people come to me and they've tried this and that and that. They want to do as much as they can because there's so much going on. They feel they have to keep up with the market. And I'm like, no, no, no. Minimum core set of skills. Everything else is you get paid to learn that on the job. What is the minimum effective dose that'll make you clear those interviews and prove you can do the job, right? And learn everything else, and then get paid to learn the rest. Like, why are you trying to learn everything?
And I think I mentioned earlier that my background is actually fitness and exercise physiology and stuff like that. And there's actually like a lot of parallels here as well as, when I'm coaching clients for fitness stuff, and especially if they have a full-time job and they have kids and all this stuff, like, for them, it's exactly what you said. What is the minimum effective dose of training that we can do that's going to start pushing you towards your end goal? And I think I see the same thing in, developing skills with software engineering, or I also train martial arts. So even with that, it's like, what's the minimum effective dose there to start getting closer towards your goal? So I think there's a lot to be said for that, as, being able to be consistent with whatever kind of program that you're doing or whatever course you're doing or whatever kind of study routine you're doing. If you can't be consistent with it, you're going to end up falling off, getting discouraged, and then not reaching your end goal. So pick something.
Oh man, I'm so glad you brought this up.
Yep. So I'm just saying, pick something that you can be consistent with. You know that you can hit it 100% of the time. You're going to build momentum towards your goal. And hey, you might find in the future that you can bite off a little bit more and a little bit more and kind of get that ball rolling more. But, sometimes you got to pump the brakes and really get focused on a consistent plan at the start.
Ryan, are you still coaching exercise clients and fitness clients? Are you still doing that on the side?
I am doing that a bit on the side. So
you're doing that on the side. So I'm glad you brought this up, man, because I'm on LinkedIn a lot, right? And there's a huge, like all these social media things, that bubbles, right? And it's like people go on putting out content as though, as an engineer, you've got to be good at communication. You've got to have consistent habits. And I'm like, as a human being, no matter what you do, you've got to build the habits. You've got to be consistent. This is not, and this honestly was what my coach taught me. She was like, you're assuming that software engineering is different from everything else. She's like, it's not. There are meta skills at play here. Learn how to learn how to manage your behavior, learn how to manage your internal state. You do these right things, everything else fall in place after that. And I'm like, this is why I got myself a non-technical coach, but I teach all this stuff to my students now. Ultimately, you as a coach know this, right, Ryan? It's not about the weights they lift. It's about the behavior change they drive in their life. So many of us, for example, I, for years, thought that getting fit was about what I did in the gym, and it kind of didn't matter what I did in the kitchen, right? Or it didn't matter what I did with my sleep, or it didn't matter what I did with my macros. Like the real game is a system, not the one thing that we obsess about. It's not the more reps, it's not the deadlifts, all of that is part of the process, right? It's not the cold showers.
Don't get me started on cold showers.
Right. So that's what becomes the fad. And it's the same thing with coding. Like it's like, oh, I just got to complete this course. I get this, certification. I'm like, guys, if you don't change what's going on here and consistently effective behavior change, like as a coach, my job is to get my students. And by the way, just so you know, most of my students come to me and like, yeah, I want to try and do this in the next 3 to 6 months. I'm like, I'm going to work with you for a year. Either you're going to work with me for a year or you're not. It doesn't change the price. Same thing. But here's why: because it's going to take you more time than you realize. And it's a bullshit attitude that the world is going to give me something on the timeline that suits me. It's not going to work that way.
And honestly, like if you take a year and you're able to go from zero to a job in a year, like that is, and let's be honest, if you get a good software engineering job, you can make 6 figures plus in that job in kind of that time frame. So it's like, can you not give up a year of time to do this, where in normal circumstances for other jobs, you might have to go to school for 4, 5, 6 years before getting this. So
100%. And you know what? Even if you don't get a job in 12, let's say it takes 15, is that really the end of the world? Like, because you can't control the market. Look what's happening right now, right? You can't control the market. But how valuable is it to you to not have to take decisions that you know nothing about? How valuable is it for you to just be able to go do your work, come back, take care of your family, and then you know exactly what you need to do every day, right? It's like meal prep for skills. It just comes packaged, right? And you just know exactly what you need to do, and then you do that. Like with that, most people won't have the discipline or the insight to do that, and they don't need to. We don't need to. Like, we could all be growing our own food. We could all be building our own houses. The reason we get professionals to help us with that is because we need the help. It's just much more efficient that way, right? Every place is walking distance if you have the time. You get help. Like, I mean, the reason people hire you, they could absolutely get fit in their own.
totally.
Right? Why do they hire you? They hire you because you're probably going to increase their odds of success at least 300%.
And I think in any discipline in which you want to get a professional level of skills or really become competent in your skills, having some sort of coach, I think it always helps. Like right now, I view my engineering manager as my coach, so to speak. Like he is working with me on at least a weekly basis of, where we can improve and different things like that. And I'm sure you're doing the same for your clients. And also, like, I'm not sure how you set it up, but I know for my fitness clients, it's like we check in on a weekly basis. They report to me like how they've done this week, any questions they have, stuff like that. So on that weekly basis, I'm also holding them accountable to kind of staying on track with things, moving towards their goal. And I'm sure that, a lot of your clients probably notice a very similar effect with that.
Oh, absolutely. Within the first 6 weeks, that behavior shift takes between 6 to 8 weeks. And you can see it. And then just yesterday, someone sent me an email saying, how much he's changed, in the last 8 weeks. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen no matter who you work with, right? And even in at my day job at, where I work at Chainlink, which, I absolutely love the people we work with. It's because there is this attitude of we're all here to help each other, right? And that's why, like, pull requests, man, some of them are hard. Like sometimes the feedback feels harsh, right? And it's not intended to be. It's about the code. It's not about you. But dude, some of the best learning I've ever had as an engineer was not from tutorials, it was from a pull request, because somebody had seen something in their experience in this kind of pattern that they're now giving back to me. Like, that is incredibly valuable. But it is, sometimes it is a bit painful. And that's the price you pay for getting to that next level,
Yep, absolutely. And I think it's also like you'll develop a skill over time to kind of deal with pull requests that are kind of negative towards you, and you can't like take that personally. You have to separate like this is going to sound cheesy, but your own self-worth from your pull request. Like, you wrote your code, it is what it is. You are getting feedback on how you can improve it. You have to just be as kind of non-emotional about that as possible, and just take that feedback and improve. And I'm sure, I know with my clients, I try to, I think a lot of my clients do respond better to sugarcoating things a little bit and, not giving it to them super, super kind of harsh. But it's my job as a coach. I'm sure it's your job as a coach to give fair feedback. And sometimes that feedback's going to come across as a little bit critical, and that's because it is. Like, you hired me for a reason.
Oh, what? I mean, it's one of my requirements when people join the program is like, I will hold the mirror up to you and you're not going to like it, right? But if you don't know the problem, there's an old saying, right? You cannot defeat an enemy that's unknown, right? And your dark side, the bad sides, your bad habits are enemies in this example that you need to try and defeat and overcome, because they're going to try and trip you up. And I mean, the best piece of advice I ever got from that was actually from a coach, but this guy called Tim Grover, who was actually Jordan's coach during the glory years, right? And his point of that on this is the only difference between feedback and criticism is your choices on how to interpret it, like how you take it, right? 100% good feedback is that'll make you grow is often critical, because if there's nothing to criticize, you're not going to grow around it. There's no opportunity there, right? And you guys just got to take it. It's a massive. It's a gift. If you trust the person who's giving it, that's the important thing as well. There's some people who are just douchey, and you need to know when to discount them, right? They're just douchey. But if you trust the person, you know.
Absolutely. Well, we are coming up on time here, but maybe it's just kind of a final thing to end on here. Do you have any just kind of general final advice for someone that is looking to kind of get into coding, transitioning into coding? Do you have any kind of final just recommendations or anything that you would kind of point them towards as, hey, maybe start here, or maybe focus on this as you're starting out, or anything like that?
Oh man, there are probably 2 or 3 pieces to that, Ryan. So I'll try and be as concise as I can. Number one is, I think having the wrong expectations will set people up for failure. And if you don't know how to have the right expectations, get help, right? Like that's just true of anything. I know people who've climbed Mount Everest who've all experienced climbers who the first couple of times would always get a guide, even though they're super experienced. They've done Denali and stuff, right? And they'd still get it, because an unknown territory is an unknown territory from stop. You don't risk things. That's one. So that, having the right expectations or getting help to get them, that's one. The second thing is ignore social media. It is highly unlikely that anything on social media will give you professional level skills at anything, because 99.99999% of what matters is being excluded, because they've got 30 seconds or 1 minute or 60 seconds to communicate. And so, get rid of the social media stuff. That's the second, suggestion. The third suggestion is, there's know the difference between advice and opinions. Okay, the difference is advice can only come from someone who's actually done what you're trying to do. Everything else is an opinion. And I'm astonished at the number of boot camps with the teachers of people who've just finished the boot camp and haven't actually got a professional real life experience. That's actually why I joined a boot camp many years ago when I was starting out, like 4 years ago and or 5 years ago, and I quit after the first week, right? And I took a massive loan. I took it against my house. I pulled out from the mortgage, and I lost a lot of money, and I came back. And there was a reason for it, because I'm like, these guys can't teach me career change because they've not done it. That's so. Always get advice from people who've actually done what you're trying to do. That's the third one. And the last one would be, the reality of life is, there are 3 things we have to invest no matter what we do, whether it's relationships, whether it's getting good at sport, whether it's fitness, Ryan, whether it's career change, whether it's learning a complex new skill. And let's be very clear, no marketplace in the world is going to pay you 6 figures for an easy skill. Economics, okay? It's economics. If it is an easy skill, the supply side would go up, which means the price would come down. As simple as that. The reason the price is high is because the supply is not enough for the demand, and the supply is not easy to achieve because it's a complex skill. Just economics. This is not computer science, right? So, in anything in the world, there are 3 investments we need to make: time, energy, money. You cannot avoid these. If you try and avoid one or two of the others go up. So, for example, if I want to save money and I need to travel from Denver to New York, I could take a bus, I could take a train, I could walk in theory, I could drive, right? All of these will save me money compared to a plane flight, but they're going to cost me time and energy a lot more. Okay. You fly, you lose the money, or you invest the money and you gain the time and the energy back. Okay. Everything in life is these 3 knobs, volume dials, whatever you want to call them, that you've got to tweak around for your circumstances. If you don't have the money, invest the time. There's no way around it. If you don't have the time, invest the money. There's no way around it. Either way, you have to do the energy piece. But chances are you've got to dial those knobs to your life and circumstances, right? It took me a long time to learn this. And now that I've understood it, I have no problems. Like, I still spend about 20 grand a year on coaching for myself, right? Because it's just so much faster. It's so much faster. I used to, until we went overseas for a competition, of physical training coach who was outstanding. He got results for me in 6 months that I hadn't achieved in 10 years of piss fighting about it on my own, right? Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to get the goal. So those are the three pieces of advice: is be prepared to pay the price for your dream, and you'll pay the price in three ways: energy, time, money. These are the three prices, three currencies. I've talked about this on my YouTube channel. Three currencies we've all got to pay. There's no way around it.
And I definitely appreciate your forthrightness with that, to where I think a lot of people want to believe that, it's just this thing that's going to be easy to do in 3 months, and they're not going to have to spend much time, money, or effort kind of invested into it. And, I think rarely, very rarely does that ever end up working out for someone. And like you said, it is just basic economics at the end of the day. It's never going to be easy to get a nice high earning job. Like, you're going to have to go through some shit to do that for sure. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. So with that, Zubin, I know you've also started a podcast. You have your coaching services. Feel free to plug away. Where can people find all that stuff, and go check that stuff out?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Well, I mean, no real plug. I think people find me. The one thing I've always noticed is that motivated people find the resources. Like, they just get resourceful. People who are resourceful will always win. So probably best place to find me on LinkedIn. I can flick you the links to all that. My website, Think with the Coaching, is matchfitmastery.com. But the YouTube channel is just at Zubin Pratap. Again, I can flick you the links. That's fairly new. The podcasting on I put it on Spotify, like it's literally just 2 months old. But it's there to answer. I keep getting a lot of people say, "Hey, can you give me your tips?" And I'm like, "There are no tips. This is not a horse race, man. Like, this is a career change. Okay, there are no tips. It's everything. It's not one thing, right?" So, but I've noticed a pattern to the questions, and so when I get a lot of these kind of questions, I just do a 20-minute. Here's what it is. I do a screen share of the main points in the document, because I structure my thinking and I take people through that. And I've answered the question about, should you even code? Because I genuinely believe not everyone needs to code. Like, you do not need to fall into that hype cycle. The thing about AI, I'm going to put something about that, because there's such a lot of BS hype around that. To be honest, I'd be much more worried if I was a doctor or an advertising or salesperson than I would be as an engineer. I'm much more worried for those folks than I am for the.
To that point, I was going to mention this a little bit earlier, but I think that one benefit of software engineering being a very complex skill is that it's not easily replaceable by artificial intelligence or something like that. To where, yes, is AI going to get better and better at writing out some code if you give it a certain prompt? Of course it is. But it's still going to be your job as an engineer to fit all these kind of complex pieces together, whether it's, scaling your database or having different authentication solutions and kind of all this other stuff that kind of fits together. Because it's complex, yeah, it's hard. I understand. I think it's hard as well. You're not alone. But that also is giving us some job security, because it is so hard.
Total. And you know what? We're going to evolve. Like, every profession is going to evolve. It has to evolve. Like, the invention of the computer didn't destroy typists. They just destroyed, they didn't destroy typing. It just took away typists as a profession, but we still type more than we ever did. That's all that happens, is that our skills evolve with it. And it's to me, I love the AI stuff, because as it gets better, my productivity gets faster. I don't get stuck in a march anymore, compared to how it used to. It just, what's going to happen is that the demand for work, because when people's productivity goes up, the work output improves, which means more products come online, which means more innovations done. It's simply because people get stuck less, or they have a rocket ship strapped to their back. You just can get more done. Productivity will go on. And I see that the Biden administration has floated some bill about a 4-day work week to capture some of the benefits of AI. I think this happened yesterday, where they're proposing a 4-day work week to say that some of the huge productivity gains that have come from AI should be given back to the workforce in the form of a 4-day work week. Now, are you in support of AI? Like, it could really work out, well.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Cool. Well, I've taken enough of your time today here, Zubin, but thank you so much for joining me today. I personally, selfishly, really enjoyed this conversation. So I'm sure those listening did as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity, and keep up the great work. And I'm glad you're still coaching people, because I think helping people directly in that one-on-one way is a real spiritual thing. So good for you, man. Well done.